hear from Dwayne Jackson. Dwayne was in our second cohort training just about a year ago, and he has taken on 2 cases for 2 children each. In one instance, protective supervision, and the other case, foster care. So he has a good range of experience already in a year. And whatever you don't have a chance to hear him say today, you can hear him in a couple of recordings on our YouTube channel and also on a podcast. I included the links. So Dwayne.
Hi, everyone. Glad to join you. As Josiah mentioned, my name is Dwayne Jackson, and I retired from United Technologies, just by way of background. I retired from United Technologies about 10 years ago. My background is in human resources management and organizational effectiveness. And over the past 10 years, I've been involved in various community initiatives. But I will tell you that joining CASA and being part of the CASA family has been by far the most rewarding experience, which also includes, by the way, close to 3 years I spent overseas in Africa with the United States Peace Corps. So also, as Josiah described, my charge is for 2 sets of siblings. One set is age 10 and 7. It involves a boy and a girl. And the other set involves 2 siblings, one age 7 and the other one turns 3 next week. I've been involved with both sets of children for about 5 to 6 months. And all 4 children have endured some degree of trauma and neglect. So the circumstances for both sets of cases differ. And of course, each child is different. But common threads in terms of processing have emerged for me in my CASA role. So what I want to do is share with you in my allotted time to describe those 3 particular common processes that relate to the issues and questions that your class has thus far provided. Issue number 1 is access to and involvement of attorneys. Bianca covered some of that, and I can give you some added perspective as well. Issue 2 is access to child records, including caseworkers' files, to what extent court orders or parent releases are needed, and in obtaining information directly from parents or providers. So I can speak a little bit about that. And then finally, the 3rd issue I want to spend a couple minutes to touch upon is that the meeting with the child, the first meeting and ongoing meetings with the child, and our ability to assess need. So in terms of the first issue, access and involvement of attorneys, I have found in both cases the need to link with attorneys has come up a few times. They've been responsive in one case in my request to have conversations with, well, at least one conversation with an incarcerated father. Now that call was not supervised, although the attorney was very helpful and gracious in setting up the interview with that parent. In another case involving an estranged mother or non-custodial mother, the attorney was very helpful in setting up the call, giving me access to speak with that mother in terms of gauging her attitude toward the children and her wish to have more access to them. So that conversation was very helpful, and the attorney was helpful in getting that conversation set up. And in another instance, the attorney was very helpful in providing information about an upcoming hearing that was scheduled. The parent was very anxious in terms of knowing more about the hearing, when it was, and some of the protocols there. So I was able to relay that information to her. With regard to issue 2, access to child records, including caseworkers' files, court orders, etc. I have found, first of all, that the DCF social worker, in both cases, both DCF social workers, both shared their historical reports with me in that initial meeting with them, and in one case with their supervisor. And of course, Josiah was party to those conversations as well. So getting a good head start in managing the case was enabled by having an upfront meeting with, or preliminary meeting with, the DCF social worker. But again, immediately following that initial meeting with the social worker, they were very helpful in terms of sharing the records and information that they had available in terms of status reports and some of their preliminary findings. I also found that the certain providers, such as the schools, the parties within the school system, they provided information on academics and access to, in one case, the child's individualized educational program, the IEP, and then allowing me or giving me access to join in some of those PPT, those planning team meetings. That was very helpful in helping me orient to what was going on with the child who happened to have some special needs, and being party to how they were developing their strategy and going about assessment and placement immediately and then longer term. The parents and the caregiver have been very forthcoming in sharing information. When I ask questions, in all instances, they've been very forthcoming in responding to my questions, seemingly being open and honest, certainly being caring, and even following up with some questions that they might have of me. So that interaction, and Bianca spoke to this to some extent, the rapport you establish, I was able to establish with the parents or the caregiver, is largely attributed to their own willingness to be forthcoming, open and honest with me. And in my responding in kind, I think it helped to swiftly allow us to establish trust, and gave us each some level of credibility. And speaking of credibility, I would also say that one of you mentioned earlier, it was brought up earlier, that when meeting with the child and all of the caregivers or the parties around the child, it is so important to establish early on trust and rapport. And I thought, and my feeling is that a gateway to that is having the DCF caseworker be with us when we have that initial meeting with the caregiver. That gives us some immediate credibility, I think, and some greater confidence by the caregiver that we are there for their benefit by having us introduced by a known entity such as the DCF caseworker. So last issue I wanted to briefly touch on is that initial meeting with the child. And as indicated just a second ago, the DCF caseworker is very helpful in setting up that initial meeting. Although after that meeting, I didn't find it necessary to continue to engage the DCF caseworker in my meetings. I felt that with that initial segue into the life of the child, that I felt more confident and enabled to carry on those conversations in those meetings alone without the benefit of the caseworker being present. Now, having said that, I also have found it useful, and by way of feedback, apparently they have found it useful for me to periodically check in with them to let them know where things stand in terms of my recent interactions with the children, with the caregivers, and if there are any residual issues that might have surfaced since their last visit with either party. So that exchange, that ongoing exchange or update with the social worker has been very helpful on both sides. I would also tell you that because of COVID, the past 4 months, or the first 4 months of my my work with these families has been through Zoom or through phone conversations. Fortunately, because of the availability of the vaccines, and I've received both doses of the Moderna vaccine, I've been able to meet with them live at their homes over the past month. And I will tell you, not surprisingly, that has been very helpful in terms of giving a clearer picture in terms of what's going on with the child, how they behave, how they respond to not only me, but also to their caregiver, how the siblings respond to each other, their ability to communicate effectively, to express their needs, to what extent they appear at least healthy, to what extent they are behaving in an age-appropriate manner. All of those things are more immediately visible or discernible when you actually are sitting or standing in front of the child. So as a matter of fact, in a recent hearing with one of these sets of kids, the judge actually asked to what extent all of the parties, the attorneys, the DCF social worker, the CASA, to what extent we've been able to engage live with these parties. And fortunately, I was able to say that I've had live conversations with the children and with their caregiver. And the judge expressed a little bit of dismay in terms of the inability of the other parties to do so. But I recently found out that the DCF caseworker, up until then, they were restricted from actually visiting the homes. But apparently, and I don't know if our particular hearing was the trigger for this, but I did find out just yesterday that this particular DCF worker did visit the home for the first time this past week. All of this is to say that I think we can have some influence, I think, on the behavior of our colleagues who are all in it for the same cause. One last comment, and that is about what I would call meeting cadence, which I used to describe as, and I think Bianca and maybe Audrey also hinted at this, being reliable to meet regularly with the children goes a long way in terms of establishing that rapport and credibility. And to the extent that we can get into a groove, if you will, of meeting with some regular frequency. In my case, I try to meet every 3 weeks, unless something comes up, in which case I can meet in the interim. But having some regularity in terms of your meetings helps give some assurance to the family that you're in it for real, that you are committed, and that they can expect you at the appointed hour or day of the week. So that has gone a long way in terms of helping me establish some level of comfort with the children as well as their caregiver. I think my time is up. I'll leave it at that.
Dwayne, before we turn it over to Gina, I wanted to ask you, since you've had 4 children you've met and you've had a number of in-person visits, more so than a number of other folks, could you say a little something about how you've interacted with the kids? I believe in one case you tossed a football with a boy. You've engaged them talking about their school experiences, whether remote or in person. And I think when you visited the other home, you were saying that the school-age boy was showing you stuff on his Chromebook, things like that. So,
yeah, to those points, Josiah, I would say this, that I have found it very helpful to meet the child where they are. So if a child has expressed a certain interest in something, like one of the child, I had a meeting with a visit today, as a matter of fact, before this meeting. And this child is a 10-year-old boy. He's interested in anime. Now I'm 65, I don't know anything about anime. I know what it is, but I don't know, who the characters are. I certainly know what their individual attributes are. So he was uh, all in terms of anime. So he was describing to me some of these characters. And so I said, well, let me see that on your tablet. And so he brought out his Chromebook. And next thing I know, I'm learning all these things about all of these characters. And I think my interest, he's feeding off of my interests. So I think that's an example of finding common ground, if you will, and using that as an impetus or springboard to get further inside the child's head and have them be more at ease in sharing what's really on their mind, aside from some kind of special interest.
Thank you, Dwayne. Any questions for Dwayne now before we invite Gina to speak?
I have a quick one. Dwayne, how long do you meet with these children approximately when you meet with them? I'm focusing on live because hopefully that's the direction we'll be going.
Right. A good question. So as I might have alluded to a second ago, of late, my goal is to meet every 3 weeks. I can cut that.
No, for how long when you meet with them? I'm sorry.
Oh, the duration of the meeting.
Yeah, I didn't make myself clear.
I'm sorry, an hour. Yeah. For example, today it was an hour. I met yesterday with the other set, and that meeting was just short of an hour.
Okay.
And I don't extend it to an hour just arbitrarily.
Right.
It usually takes that time to get settled, to engage in an idle chit chat, and then to really dig in terms of asking some questions. The other thing I would share with you is that very often the caregiver is there when I'm meeting with the two children together. So there's 4 of us meeting. But by and by, somebody will disappear, go into another room, usually the caregiver, and I'll have at least a few moments of private time with either the 2 children alone, the 2 children together without the caregiver,
I understand.
or the individual child. As in, like for today, I spent probably a good 15 minutes with the older sibling alone, and that's when I got the lowdown on anime.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's appropriate, if there's time now or maybe later, but I would love to hear you tell us why this has been the most rewarding community work you've done when you've done so many other kinds.
I would say this, great question. Unlike serving on board of directorships, unlike even my work in the Peace Corps where I'm serving communities, when you're a CASA, you deal at a one-to-one level. And when you reach a child, any human being on a one-to-one level, it tugs at the heart. There's something because there's a certain intimacy about that you don't get from serving on, working on projects or working even with groups of people. When you're dealing with the personal issues of a person at a given moment in their life, that has a profound effect, hopefully on the person that you're helping to support, but certainly on you as the listener and the provider. It's that one-on-one aspect that I find most rewarding.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne, and thank you, Maggie and others, for eliciting those responses.